Cool. Hey everybody, this is Phil Smith here with the Practical Spirituality Podcast. Today, my guest is Donna Carole. She's back once again for the second podcast. It's good to see you, Donna.
Nice to see you too, Phil.
I'm going to just introduce you quickly.
Okay.
Donna's a hypnotherapist, NLP master trainer based in Newquay in Cornwall. She specialises in teaching her students how to get to and resolve the root cause of mental and emotional health problems using the latest dynamic energy psychologies. Donna has thousands of hours of experience working with clients one-to-one and has a particular passion for curing depression rapidly. This rapid cure for depression and other mental health problems will soon be available on an online program which Donna is currently putting together. And she's also the host of the new Love Consciousness movement and podcast, which is also called Love Consciousness.
Wow, Phil. Amazing, yeah. Thank you.
No less. How are you doing?
I'm really good. And obviously we've spoke before and I'm quite excited about this podcast because out of everything that I practice, as you know, helping individuals overcome depression is a particular passion of mine.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome.
So thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming. So let's get stuck in. Firstly, I think it would be really good if you... mine just got stuck. We're lifting up our glasses and the placemats are getting amusingly stuck to the bottom of the glasses. So let's start out by defining depression. What is your definition of depression?
I suppose my definition of depression would generally be that depression is a form of repressed emotion. So if you're suffering from feelings of depression and the typical signs and symptoms that go along with what we label as depression, so such as, a lot of people feel lacking of energy, lacking in motivation. There's generally some kind of negative feeling there, whether it be sadness, guilt, anxiety. Through that lack of energy and through that lack of kind of motivation, then other behaviours are developed, such as not wanting to get out of bed in the morning, having very little joy for life and the things that you are participating in life. But going back to what I would label, how I would label depression, at some point in your life you have experienced some kind of emotional upset. Now that might be a single moment of emotional upset, or that might be many years of continuing to be in a hard situation, a difficult situation, perhaps dealing with a particular negative emotion or negative event and not having the resources, the support, or the ability to process that negative emotion in any way. So what happens is let's say we have gone through a difficult emotional event, let's say as a teenager, okay, and we don't feel equipped to share that problem with our parents, perhaps we don't want to, because often teenagers don't share problems with their parents, and let's say that our friends aren't equipped to help us with this particular problem. So rather than actually dealing with whatever the issue is, often it's easier, or at least at that point in time it feels easier to just push that feeling down. Try to forget about the event. Let's just move forward. Keep moving forward, and that's fine in the moment, and it maybe gives individuals a relief at that moment in time. But the more you push an emotion down, the more repressed an emotion becomes, and obviously the longer you move forward, continuing to push this repressed feeling down, the heavier the emotion that you've not resolved, that you've not looked at, that you've not dealt with becomes. Hence, then you develop signs and symptoms of depression. So you've got this kind of heavy, unresolved, emotional, energetic blockage, I suppose. And obviously, depending on what created that blockage in the first place, will make the signs and symptoms to each individual just differ ever so slightly.
Yeah.
So if it was because of self-worth, let's say bullying was involved, then that individual will probably have very low self-worth, probably worry that they're not good enough, probably worry about what other people think of them. Okay, if the depression was caused by being made to feel guilty about something that they'd done, then that individual suffering from depression would tend to be someone that suffered a lot of guilt in lots of different areas of their life. So the particular emotion that's been repressed can change the individual experience of depression when you're looking at an individual that's experiencing these signs and symptoms that we now label as depression, so to speak.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
It's really interesting the way that you talk about repression of emotion, pushing it down, and it becoming heavy, because that's very indicative of like how you see depression, it being a heavy thing, you know, not having any motivation to do stuff.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of individuals will describe a heaviness about their energy or their physical bodies, even as far as aches and pains and stresses within the physical body, and also a cloudiness within the mind, a fog within the brain. And again, all of these things are attached to this heavy emotion that you're carrying around. Often because these negative events, these negative emotional events, often because we have become so good at repressing our feelings as part of our society, these emotions can kind of be shoved down under the surface for many, many years. 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And so individuals, because they've been fighting these heavy emotions for so long, almost get to a point of feeling that this way of being is just their kind of normal, when in fact it's not. It's that something's not been resolved, something's not been addressed.
Yeah. And is that like a way of coping with the being in that state?
I suppose at this point maybe I should say that one of the reasons why I went on the search to discover how to cure depression was because of my own battle with depression.
Okay. Tell us about that, if that's all right.
So my battle with depression, again, sorting out your own problems is always more difficult, okay, than actually having a therapist or someone to assist you, because you often can't see the problem that you're stuck in as clearly as what you would like. But after 20 years of knowing that there was just something not right, life being a bit of an uphill struggle energetically, emotionally, mentally, and obviously I don't think we were as well educated when we were young. I mean, I'm 41 now, and so all the way through my late teens and early 20s, I had no idea it was depression that I was suffering from. I just thought that I was overly tired. I just thought that I had no energy. I just felt down a lot, but I didn't actually label it or try to find the answers at that point in my life. I suppose you just find coping mechanisms. You just cope with things in the best way that you can. If you end up sleeping half the day when you're younger, you don't beat yourself up too much about that. You just think it's all part and parcel of growing up, and you've not quite found that part of yourself yet that wants to be up first thing in the morning and be organised. So there's a lot of reasoning that you give yourself for why you feel the way that you do without actually labelling it as depression, because I wasn't educated, I wasn't a therapist of mental health back then. However, it became more apparent when I got into my mid-20s that there was definitely something not right, and that the way that I had to struggle mentally and emotionally and physically through life wasn't as normal is what I maybe once thought it was.
Yeah.
And always trying to find this balance and really struggling to do that. And what I noticed after a prolonged period of time, so over a number of years, was that depression for me was like a bit of a wave. So when I was at the top of the wave, I was functioning fairly normal.
Mm-hmm.
I was finding a little bit of balance in my life. I was finding a bit of flow in life, and I was able to feel, reasonably happy. But something would then trigger that emotion that was lying perhaps a little bit more dormant up to the surface, and it would feel like, from what I can remember, waking up in the morning and having a real heaviness about you, having a feeling of fog in your head, having a feeling like there was a cloud following you round, and I begun to recognise that feeling as my depression. And sometimes that feeling would last a couple of days, sometimes it would last a couple of weeks, sometimes it would last a few months. But what I found is, as I moved forward in life, when that feeling was triggered, it seemed to be getting worse over time. And I don't know whether that was because I began labelling what that feeling meant, and I began feeling a feeling of dread when that feeling would pop up to the surface. So it was almost as though there's that feeling, oh no, how long is it going to last? I can't deal with this anymore. When am I ever going to be normal? All of these kind of thoughts and feelings that I then attached to the initial feeling of that we're labelling as depression. This went on and on. As I said, it was 20 years, and I trained to be a hypnotherapist and NLP practitioner. Probably I was practicing these things for at least 5 years before I fully overcame my depression. Now, what that meant for me as a hypnotherapist was, when I first started practicing, I found that anyone that came to me for me to help them cure their depression, I didn't feel equipped to do that. They were also triggering me. So I was going home after seeing a client when depression came up in the, or some form of depression came up in the therapy session. I was going home worrying constantly. Did I say the right thing? Did I do the right thing? How can I possibly even begin to help this client when I can't even treat my own depression? And so what I did was, I think a lot of people would do the same in my position, is I just refused to see anyone that was suffering from depression.
Wow.
I completely changed. I sort of specified, this is what I practice in, this is what I can help treat, and depression was not on that list.
Okay.
And at the point in time when I eventually found a way of overcoming my own depression, I have no idea what led me to that point, but I feel as though it was a series over a couple of years of the kind of deepest depression that I'd ever felt in my adult life. I went to the doctors, I went down all the normal kind of routes through the NHS. I'd done some online counselling, I think it was CBT. I was offered medication, but I just never ever wanted to go down that route, because I didn't feel that actually the medication was actually going to help cure me of my depression. I just felt like it was going to numb me up, and I'm a really sensitive person to things like that. And I think after hitting an all-time low, I was lay there in bed, which was my best friend, and there was something really deep inside of me that was just telling me that I had to find a way of overcoming this, that I simply couldn't do this anymore. And from that kind of, that inner voice that was urging me, it came like a real sense of determination with it. And I decided to just start researching every possible way. I didn't care what type of modality it was, whether it was mainstream, whether it was psychic stuff, whether it was energetic psychology, whether it was hypnotherapy based, NLP based. EFT based. I wanted to know how all of these different modalities, how they went about addressing and successfully treating what we call depression.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the start of my journey. And I have to say that within a matter of a couple of weeks, I was depression free.
Wow.
So it was then, the problem was then, is because everything all came at once. I then had to figure out what it was that I had applied that had actually rid me of my feelings of depression.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question.
Well, yeah, because you can imagine I was applying everything. I mean, I'm not joking here when I say that sheer determination from inside of me was meaning that what I was actually doing is I was sitting there all day long. Any opportunity I had, I was trying different techniques on myself. And when I was finding something, so one of the techniques where I first began to feel shifts was EFT. So every opportunity, that I had, I was trying to clear something out using, sort of an EFT process.
Yeah.
At the same time, I was tapping into a hypnotherapist called David Snyder, and his approach was working with the emotion, so working with the physical, emotional element that you can feel within your physical body, as opposed to working with the mind.
Yeah.
That was a massive turning point, because again, it was a whole new way of looking at depression treatments, and there was lots of other ideas coming in. So ideas from NLP, for example, like timeline therapy, and Dr. Bruce Lipton. I came across him in the biology of beliefs.
Yeah.
And so I'm just feeding my mind with all this information, and any practical techniques that I could practice, I was practicing day and night. And I just woke up one morning and I just knew. I knew that feeling that had been with me for 20 years was not there anymore. And like I said at the start of this podcast, you get to the point where you are so used to carrying this slight heaviness with you, even when you feel happier, it's still there, that you think that it's normal. And it's not until that is released or removed that you know that something major has been shifted. And I knew it was my depression that had been shifted, and it's never returned to this day. So yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And what you've just said is proof, really, that you can cure depression without medication.
Yeah. I mean,
when medication isn't a cure anyway. It treats the symptoms, and it actually makes you get worse because it causes all sorts of other problems. But there might be a belief out there that depression isn't curable.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because that is exactly what the belief is that's out there with depression, anxiety, trauma, all of these really heavy emotional burdens that we label as conditions. Depression, I thought that I was broken. That was my belief. I thought that there was just something wrong with me. I was just wired up differently. Perhaps it's a genetic thing.
Yeah.
Because I have a lot of mental health in my family, as I think a lot of individuals actually do.
Yeah.
And then when you go for help, because it takes a lot. It took me 10 years of suffering before I even approached a doctor.
Wow.
And we're going back to a point in time where depression had a lot of stigma attached to it.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy that it doesn't have that the same amount of stigma attached to it now. So we've come so far. But I didn't share my depression with anyone. Even within my personal close relationships, those individuals didn't know that I was suffering from depression. I kept it that well hidden because I was ashamed of being depressed.
Yeah.
I was ashamed of these feelings that I didn't even understand. So how can I possibly share them with someone else if I don't even know what's going on with me? I thought I was crazy. You know, I just thought I was mental, you know. So going to the GP, trying the treatments, doing the therapy, the counselling, and still not feeling any difference, you just kind of get to the point, well, it's not treatable. And there's no obvious, well, at least there wasn't for me, there wasn't anything mainstream obvious to show me otherwise, you know? So why would you think it's treatable? You know, it wasn't like, you know, there's so many other conditions where it's obvious mainstream that there is a treatment process that you go through. But with mental illness, not so much, you know. So then obviously, because I was a therapist, of course, what did I want to do? I instantly wanted to integrate the ideas that I had discovered into my therapy practice so that I could then help other people. But first of all, I had to figure out exactly what it was that had, what it was out of all of the techniques that I had applied, what were the ones that had actually done it for me.
Yeah.
You know.
Let me ask you about what they were, and then a second part to that question. What is the key? What are the key? What is the maybe the one key component of the therapies that worked for you? What's the key component? What's the major thing? What part of your body mind are you working with that makes all the difference when it comes to working with depression? When it comes to curing depression?
I think that number one, what you've got to understand is that when working with depression, you've got to work within the subconscious mind. You can't. I mean, I'm not saying you can't. I shouldn't be saying you can't, because someone will come along and prove me wrong. But I feel that it's much easier, much more effective, and you get much more rapid results by bypassing the conscious mind and going into the subconscious mind. Because if you remember what I said at the start, that depression is a repressed emotion from the past, which means that actually your depression is locked into past memories, something that hasn't been resolved. And the only way of really exploring really properly the programming that is created out of that unresolved event in your life, emotional event, is to delve into the subconscious mind. Now that might be the emotions, it might be the negative beliefs, it might be the memories, but the best place to start to get an instant energetic result is working with the emotional element of the depression. I mean, obviously, I've been now treating depression with my clients for around 7 years, and the information that I started with has obviously grown, and I've added to it, and there's different elements to it now. But if I was to go way back then to 7 years ago, it was the biggest eye opener and the biggest turnaround for me was to focus on the emotion, was to work from the emotion, work from that point. And there's lots of different techniques that enable you to do that. But again, it was developing like a technique that seemed to fit most people, and was giving the fastest and most permanent results. And for me, that was using a combination of hypnotic techniques, because the hypnotic techniques and addressing the subconscious mind allowed me to locate the memory or the point in time when the depression was first created. And once you can tap into the memory, it becomes much clearer for you as the therapist treating your client, and for the individual that wants to overcome their emotional issue, what created the emotional issue in the first place. In other words, you then know what needs to be resolved. You know, you then can explore what negative beliefs might be locked in place throughout because of this emotional. You might know, you've got a much better understanding almost instantly. You know, on session 1, of this process of what it is that's actually going on, because most people don't know what's caused their depression because it's been repressed for so many years.
Yeah.
So but working with the emotion is a completely different way of looking at it, because we've always called it mental health.
Yeah.
You know, and so and that's kind of misleading.
Yeah.
In a little way, because
Yeah,
actually depression is not a mental health issue, it's an emotional health issue. The same as anxiety is an emotional health issue, and trauma, or and anything else that you would put into those categories. So, if you can clear out the negative emotion, that heaviness, that cloud, that brain fog that we attach to the signs and symptoms of depression, it disappears instantly.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that that's all an individual has to do to fully overcome the depression, but that is an amazing start.
Yeah.
And it's so fast and it's so rapid that, once you clear the heavy energy out, then there's such an immense relief. And you've also cleared a space to then work on the other things that are also important, such as the more positive beliefs, or creating more positive behaviours as they move into the future. So
I want to talk a little bit more about. So you've made it quite clear that the first step in overcoming depression is locating and clearing out the repressed unconscious emotion that created it, and that's in the subconscious mind. So
It's
you made that quite
mind,
clear.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do in a minute is ask you about what, after doing that, because that's the first step, right? After doing that, what conscious behaviours, what can people consciously do to fill that space with positive stuff to further reinforce that deeper work? But before we do that, I'd like to just go a little bit deeper into some of the emotional elements of depression.
Yeah, of course.
So if we look at negative emotions, anger, sadness, fear, guilt, hurt, anxiety, shame, are probably the main players, aren't they? Anxiety, past anxiety. They're the key, like, negative emotions. Are there certain repressed negative emotions associated with depression?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I think that there, on a percentage scale, depression tends to be, and again, it can be any of those emotions that you have just described. If they have been repressed, they can create a heavy energy. But what you find generally, a lot of the people that are suffering from depression, a sense of isolation or loneliness comes into that feeling of depression. Self-worth. There's always an element of not good enough, or not lovable, or not worthy on some level. There seems to be some kind of wound, which very often is a sadness. So again, I can't give you percentages, but just kind of working with lots and lots of one-on-one clients over the years, I would say the biggest majority of individuals share those similar characteristics when it comes to the emotions and the beliefs that they hold surrounding their depression. But obviously, because I've been working with lots of clients, I also discovered that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's got to be sadness that was the emotion that was repressed. It can be guilt. It can be shame. It can be fear. Although very often fear tends to create feelings of anxiety first. But then, of course, if someone's really, really fed up of feeling anxious, they can become very sad. And then the sadness, if that's repressed, then they can become depressed as well as anxious.
And that leads to manic depression,
Well,
right?
yeah, well, exactly, because then,
Yeah.
you've got...
Or bipolar, sorry.
Bipolar.
Yeah, that's right.
Also, very interesting, I mean, just because you mentioned bipolar, about 15 or 16 years into my depression, I convinced myself that I had bipolar disorder. And what I then realised, once I began to unravel all of this and began to understand what I was going through, is that my symptoms of bipolar were actually just a defence mechanism that I created as a way of pulling me out of my depression. So if I had had a real depressive episode, somewhere, some resource from deep inside me would kick into action, and I would literally, like you say, that manic behaviour, that manic thinking, where I'm trying to do like the job of 10 people all in the course of one day, and the amount of work that I could get through when I was in one of those kind of manic episodes was absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
I could build a whole business in a day.
Wow.
But then what would happen is obviously you burn yourself out.
Yeah.
And I would just crash. And something that I'd maybe spent 3 days working on in a complete manic state, that was almost at completion, where as soon as I hit that low again, I didn't want to even look at any of it. It was all rubbish. It was all a waste of time. I didn't even want to do that anymore anyway. But I do find it interesting that, for me personally, I felt like it was a defence mechanism that I had created to pull myself out of my depression.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And again, it's just a slightly different way of looking at it.
Yeah. I guess in terms of energy, everything's got its opposite, right? And as the pendulum swings, if there's an extreme one way, there's going to be an extreme the other way. And which is why I guess they often go hand in hand, anxiety and depression, don't they?
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
You very often, when I'm treating individuals with anxiety, there might be some form of depression there, and vice versa. Obviously, for different individuals, one element is more profound than the other.
Yeah, because one's almost a response to the other.
Yeah.
I know from my biggie was always anxiety. So, and I know from my own experience that being on an anxious kind of high for a long time, the fallout to that would be that I could fall into depression because it was just fucking exhausting. And so I've experienced that kind of, but from the other way around. I'm going to throw a statement at you now.
Okay.
And I'm just... it just came to me.
Okay.
And I just want you to just go with the first... Just give me the first response and tell me what you think about it.
Okay.
All right? Depression is a result of a chemical imbalance. It's a purely biological phenomenon.
Okay, wow. So this is something that I've always had a little bit of a problem with. I mean, I would again say that actually flip it on its head, turn it upside down. Yes, depression creates a chemical imbalance, but the chemical imbalance is created through the repressed emotion that you've not resolved. So, I know that there's a lot of information out there saying that individuals that are depressed have a chemical imbalance. Of course, you have a chemical imbalance. You're not in balance. You're carrying around a big, heavy emotion for 20 years. It's going to cause a little bit of a chemical upset, isn't it? So, I think that it's a little bit like what comes first, the chicken or the egg.
Totally, yeah.
What does come first? Who knows? Maybe in some individuals there is a slight imbalance there anyway, and maybe they would be more prone to developing.
Like a genetic predisposition.
Possibly, yes. But personally, from the work that I've done, and because this type of therapy, it's really effective. It's not like hit or miss therapy. It's really effective. In roundabout 80% of individuals, you're getting the results that you want to get, so long as those individuals are actually willing to really dig deep and really address and resolve past issues that may come
Yeah.
up to the surface.
Yeah.
So yeah, because you can see those results and because you get that feedback and because individuals experience that shift in their energy and then go on to finding that balance within their lives that they've maybe never had before. I believe that it's caused by repressed emotions, and these repressed emotions may have been created when you were 6 months old, or 2 years old, and that's the great thing about using the hypnotic subconscious techniques to really bring up to the surface those memories, because how would you do that otherwise? How can you tap into an emotion that someone felt when they were 2 years old without going into the subconscious mind? You know, you can't do it. We can't find those memories. So yeah.
We don't have a relationship with the subconscious mind in this society that we live in. We're very cut off from it, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, society, it's probably good to mention society and all this, because we come from, and again, it's getting better. I'm really, really happy to see that it's getting better and people are becoming more aware of mental health and emotional health, and people aren't ashamed to admit that they're struggling. But we come from a place where our parents, and going even further back, our parents' were quite a repressed nation. The UK. Aren't we? And it's all, again, those beliefs and programs that were created when we were very young. That, you know, for example, with men, you know, I think were we talking about this the other day, that, you know, oh yeah, boys don't cry.
Big boys don't cry.
Big boys don't cry. And classic. I remember, like, you know, my brother being called a pussy. Have you cried? You know, and this is by, you know, your father, or, you know.
Oh God, yeah.
And it's just absolutely, when you think about it now with the understanding that we know now.
I've been called that even in recently.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, you know what I'm like.
Yeah.
I'm always crying. But it just goes to show that. I mean, I don't personally give a fuck. Like,
no.
you know, I know that it's healthy.
Good for you.
I think it takes a lot of courage to go against the grain and be a man that's not afraid to show his emotions.
Yeah, it does.
You know, you're strong if you can do that. And I know that, and I also know that it's good for my health if I feel an emotion and I just need to let it pass through me. But it's interesting to even to point out that even like recently in my adult life, I've still received judgments like that, even now, from other adults. Not, you know, and even to go with all the, it's just like, it goes to show
it's closed-mindedness, and again, it's going back to generation after generation after generation of passing on this faulty programming that doesn't serve us. You know, so you saying, as a therapist, if you feel an emotion, you let it up and you let it out. Why? Because you know the danger in repressing your emotions. And how many people, and not just men, women, children, throughout society, have been taught since a young age that, oh, wipe yourself down and get on with it, or, you know, you just have to get on, don't think about it. Not receiving emotional support. And so not ever developing tools to assist in your own emotional development and your own emotional health. It really fascinates me, Phil. Like, it really, my brain can't comprehend how, as a human being, throughout the entire planet, okay, we all, every single one of us, have one thing in common, and that is that we all feel the same set of emotions, yet we're never taught emotional health at school. We're never taught. We never even do a simple lesson. What is happiness? What is sadness? What is guilt? What is shame? We don't even discuss the emotions that we all experience, that we all have that in common. Never mind actually discuss tools to manage those emotions. Why is that?
Yeah, it goes back to those beliefs, and I guess those beliefs, like how we create beliefs, is through experience, and the conditions of the times when those beliefs were created is very different to what they are 30 years later. You know, and so they become. I guess those beliefs culturally they become so ingrained, and they're unconscious on a collective level.
Yeah.
So therefore we don't review them, and as 30 years might pass or 100 years might pass, and it's like, hold on a minute, we haven't really like reviewed the some of these cultural beliefs that underpin our entire worldview as a society. We don't, because we're not aware about beliefs, are we? We're not aware, we're not self-aware
I think we're
as individuals or collectively.
I mean, we're beginning to understand the nature of beliefs, the programming that's created through our belief systems. Again, collective beliefs, societal beliefs. And I think that the more individuals out there can understand how powerful beliefs are, then you can begin to unravel some of the beliefs that might not be working for you. First of all, as an individual, and then hopefully over time, as a society. You know, I think that things are changing anyway, naturally.
They are definitely.
For example, because we are now aware of this stuff, we know to try our hardest to be more self-aware as parents, passing on certain negative beliefs to our younger children, so that they don't have to then try to undo them later on. Whereas, you know, we can't blame our parents for giving us sets of negative beliefs because they were not aware,
of course not,
of any of this stuff, and their parents even more unaware.
Yeah.
You know, we are becoming more conscious of ourselves as we evolve as human beings. So, and that's all good. And again, it's having that more understanding of emotions and beliefs is what has helped individuals like myself and you as therapists develop programs where you can actually effectively cure emotional problems at the root cause, meaning that they are cured, they're resolved permanently, permanent results. We're not giving people coping mechanisms or new defence strategies. We're actually resolving things at a root cause. And I suppose it would be now, I mean, I'm speaking to people, you know that I'm really passionate about depression, and because when you're there yourself for 20 years and you're crying out for help and you don't think there's any way out, to then discover that there are actually a set of actually very simple techniques that you can use to begin to move yourself out of that place. Of course you want to let other people in the world know that that's available. You want to get that information out. When I first came across this stuff, I couldn't believe it. I felt as though I'd been dropped into an alternative reality where things that I didn't think was possible were suddenly now possible. And so it was a really exciting period to overcome depression and then realise that you can begin to unpick and reprogram any negative belief that you want to. And, you know, people need to know about this stuff.
They do,
You know, because it's truly life-changing. And the ideas behind them can be applied to any area of your life, not necessarily just depression. So that's what's so exciting about them. So
let's get to the some of the more conscious behaviours that you can do. As it's really important to point this out, isn't it? These are not going to necessarily work by themselves. You've got to do the subconscious work. So you clear the emotions and the beliefs out of the subconscious, create some space, and then you can start implementing conscious strategies to reinforce the work that you've done in the subconscious. Can you tell me about some of those?
I think that, I mean, as you say, the first important thing is to clear out the heavy emotion.
Yeah.
Once the heavy emotion has been cleared out, the individual that normally feels like everything's a constant battle suddenly has this new energy about them. So in other words, you have more energy. You have more energy, you have more motivation. It's that simple. So you know, as you said, you've created this space, and because you've got the energy, you're then able to create things that are healthier for you as an individual. Now, there's no right or wrong. There's not one thing. I mean, if I was to recommend to someone what's the number one thing that you should do to assist you in feeling better, is to address your diet and exercise. That would be the number one thing. It's the most basic thing. If an individual with depression could sort their diet and exercise out, they would probably alleviate a lot of their depression symptoms anyway. The only problem is that number one, they don't have the motivation because they don't have the energy, and number two, you know, depression's very self-sabotaging in a lot of ways, and so they can't get on that healthy train to start a healthier lifestyle. So that, you know, it's this constant battle. So now that you've created some space and you've got more energy, you're much more likely to be able to begin looking at maybe improving your diet a little bit and improving your exercise routine, or just movement. Creating one.
Just move.
At this point, again, because we're working with subconscious techniques, it's very important to remember when creating anything new is not to be unrealistic with what you want to create when you're creating something that you've never done before. When we talk about exercise, for example, that does not need to be, you know, 2 hours a day, 5 days a week at the gym. You know, it can be something as simple as starting your day with a 5-minute walk around the block. You know, it could be, you know, just some gentle stretches first thing in the morning. And there's always a point of resistance within any new behaviour that you try to carry out. If it's something that is not part of your natural programming, I try to help clients like find that point of resistance and be aware of the resistance and just work just below the resistance kicking in. So what that means is, let's say we set, my client says, I've always wanted to run, and in fact I used to run a bit. Okay, well, let's get you into your running again. And I would say to my client, right, okay, what do you think would be a set amount of time that you could run without that resistance kicking in? You know? So if they said 10 minutes, and when they thought about running for 10 minutes, they could feel a heaviness coming over them, that's the resistance.
I see.
What about 5 minutes? Could you run for 5 minutes? Well, I still feel a little bit of resistance. Well, what about 2 minutes? No, I don't feel any resistance. Right. So that's your goal. You run for 2 minutes a day. And then once you've done that 2 minutes, the resistance then lifts. You know, so then you get away with building on it. And again, every individual is very different. What each individual wants to do to improve their quality of life, to make them feel good about themselves, to bring in more movement, to bring in more positivity, it needs to be worked out on an individual basis. What type of exercise suits that individual. And I think that's, again, is what's quite nice working with a therapist, is that we tend to just say, yeah, this is what I want to do, and it might be a little bit too much too soon, and you're going to hit that wall of resistance. And so just having someone just kind of say, well, let's just bring it down to something that feels more comfortable, and we can build upon that. Positive thinking. Now, positive thinking automatically happens when you begin to install new beliefs, which is all part of the program. And I encourage individuals that move on to discovering how to create positive beliefs is to make that an ongoing process. Because every single time you install a new positive belief, you get a new sense of lightness about you. And so it's a really, really nice journey to experience. It's really positive. Each positive belief that you install creates more positive thinking. So why would you not want to give yourself that gift?
Yeah.
And it's dead easy. It's not a difficult thing to do.
Talk about that a little bit more, just to give people a bit of an insight into perhaps how to start thinking more positively and programming in new positive beliefs.
Yeah. I mean, we've done a little podcast on beliefs.
We did.
So actually, it might
just
be
a brief.
useful for people to listen back to that.
Yeah,
but,
definitely. Yeah.
Obviously, with our beliefs, most of our beliefs are connected to some kind of emotion, whether that be a very strong negative emotion or whether it actually be something quite subtle that's kind of running in the background that you're not very aware of. But if we have a negative belief, even in a very subtle way, it might be blocking us from creating the things that we want to create in our lives. So an example of that, we could go back to the exercise, and we might have someone that wants to start their 2 minutes running, but every time they get up to get their running shoes, they might have a subtle belief, that's a subtle energy, a subtle emotion that's coming up, and attached to that might be a negative belief. That again you might not be aware of until you begin understanding what beliefs are and the process of pulling them up so that you can become really aware of what they are. Maybe that belief is I'm no good at sports. Because maybe at school they were in the playground and they were always last to be picked for the team. You know, these kind of things. And so once you've identified the negative belief, once you go, oh my goodness, I've got a belief that tells me that I'm not good at sports, and I'm trying to run, and every time I try to run, I'm now experiencing resistance. When you begin to understand that, you can take that belief and you can find the counter opposite. I am good at sports, or I love doing sports. And you can install that belief into your subconscious mind. And in turn, what that does is it creates a positive emotion. And basically dissolves the negative emotion, because you can't hold two conflicting. You can hold two conflicting beliefs, but the process that you would use, you'd be breaking down the old belief and installing the new belief. So then when you think about running, you've got a positive feeling that's more motivating and encouraging you to do the exercise. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I may just add a tiny little bit to that. When we're talking about these kind of beliefs, like a lot of the real stronger core beliefs will be taken care of with the subconscious work, which you do either through the program that you're creating, or with someone that works the way that you do in therapy. So then with these other kind of littler beliefs, you can become aware of them by when you feel the resistance, just following back the thoughts. What does that mean? And what does that mean? And then you get to the belief because it becomes a statement about the reality that you're facing. And then you talk about flipping that over. So if it's like one of these kind of littler beliefs will be, you're trying to put your running shoes on and you're going to go for a run, and then you feel some resistance. You trace back the thoughts. Why am I feeling like this? Why don't I want to do this? Oh, it's because of this. And why am I thinking that? It's because of this. And you keep asking yourself the questions to get to the belief of, I'm no good at sports. Oh, that's because of someone said something to me at school once. And there's a bit of an emotion there. And then you talk about flipping it. So flipping it and saying, well, I am good at sports. Now, if that's too much of a push, it doesn't necessarily need to be the exact polar opposite, does it? It could be just something else that changes the belief, but it's personal to you. So if you're going, well, I literally can't believe that I'm good at sports. I just can't authentically tell myself that I am good at sports. So I can't flip that belief on its head. So maybe it could be something like, well, you could choose to believe that it doesn't matter if I'm good at sports or not. I'm doing this for me. It's not a competition.
I enjoy doing sports.
I enjoy it, and that's why. So that's another good alternative, isn't it? To flip that belief over.
It's all. I mean, going back to emotions again, and obviously this is on depression and repressed emotion, but whether we consciously realise it or not, our body's constantly giving us emotional signals throughout our entire day, which are unconsciously guiding our decisions and our behaviours. And when you begin to understand this, that's when you can really begin to do some really good deep self-development work on yourself, because if looking at it this way, all negative emotions are kind of defense emotions, in a sense. They're there to kind of keep you safe.
Yeah.
They're there to warn you, this isn't good for you. You've experienced some kind of hurt in this type of situation in the past. And so they tend to keep you living in your comfort zone. You know, you feel a negative emotion, you step back into your comfort zone box.
Yeah.
Whereas positive emotions are growth emotions. You know, they're there to tell you that it's safe, that it feels good to move in this direction. And so, you know, you've always got two things going on. You've got the negative emotions popping up, telling you, you know, this isn't good for you. You've experienced something in the past that you didn't like. But then whenever there's a negative emotion, we also then, you've got to understand other things going on. There tends to be beliefs that we've attached to that emotion. Our personal beliefs that we've attached to that emotion. And so then what you've got is you have a triggered emotion come up to the surface. You've then got your personal beliefs and thoughts that then pop into your mind that you attach to that emotion.
Do you want some coriander in your water?
Yeah,
I just did it. It tastes really good.
And then you're then viewing your reality, or viewing your world through this filtering system of this negative emotion and all these beliefs that you've attached to this negative emotion. So, and again, it's just understanding that this is how we are programmed to experience our reality, our sense of self, our sense of the world. And the depression treatment and the anxiety treatment and the trauma treatments, they all fit in to this model of understanding the world. If you shift the emotion, you don't create the thoughts that then attach to that emotion. You know, the thoughts aren't triggered up. And if you don't create the emotion, you're not viewing your reality through this filter that is that emotion. You know,
because the emotion creates the thoughts, and the thoughts create the emotion. It's a cycle.
Yeah,
Have a thought, it sends a mixture of chemicals down into your body. You feel it as emotion, and then it sends signals back up to your brain that gives you thoughts that correlate with the feeling.
Together, what do? They create your behaviour.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so we've done mind. So we've done subconscious and conscious strategies for dealing with depression. Subconsciously clearing out the negative emotions and core beliefs that underpin it. And then consciously being more self-aware, creating new behaviours and new thought patterns, creating new little beliefs and overcoming resistance to doing things. So we've done that. So that's the mental side. The physical side is obviously the diet and the exercise, because what we put into our bodies and what we do with our bodies affects our mental health,
of course,
and vice versa. It's all one system. So we've done the mental, we've done the physical, and with the mental part is the emotions included in that. So we've done the mental, we've done the physical. Let's talk a little bit about things on a social level with depression as well. What things can we do socially to help us overcome depression?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. Again, what you've got to understand about this process is that because your emotions and the thoughts that you have attached to these emotions is creating your sense of yourself and your sense of the world. A lot of the time, so you know, you've got something called the cognitive triangle, haven't you?
Right.
Where on on each point of the triangle, you've got the elements that we're discussing. You've got the emotional element. You've got the thought element, or the beliefs element, and then you've got the behavioural element. So if we were talking about someone that was suffering, let's say, from social anxiety as part of their depression, what are the behaviours that are attached to social anxiety? Things like avoiding going out, maybe avoiding answering the phone to friends or trying to arrange to meet up with you. possibly even dreading going to work. You know, so in other words, there's part of your depression is then became that actually you want to avoid social situations. You might have beliefs in there. People don't like me, or I'm not good enough, or whatever else. But there might be the beliefs to that individual person. But going up to the top point, which is the emotions again, is the feelings. So let's say for this particular information, their depression was a combination of fear, anxiety, that's social fear, and let's say a little bit of sadness because they were really hard on themselves because no one likes them. That's what they've convinced themselves of. When you process out that emotion, or those emotions, if it's two emotions, you process out both. Process out that emotion, that triangle falls away.
Okay.
It ceases to exist in the same way. You might still look at some of the thoughts because you want to reprogram the mind to think healthier, but when they don't have an anxious or depressed feeling and they don't have anxious and depressed thoughts, their behaviours look after themselves.
Okay.
When their friend phones and asks them, do you want to go out to dinner? They've not got those negative blockages that we were talking about.
They're being driven by a different emotion.
They're being driven by even if it's a sense of ease, even if it's not a real positive emotion yet, even having a sense of ease means that they'll pick up the phone. It means that they don't have that fear-based emotion kicking in, stopping them from making social arrangements. So again, it's, from my perspective, obviously they're encouraged to make their life full and happy, and they're encouraged to begin to look at a self-care program, which might include things like, it's important to me to socialise with friends, if in fact it is. If in fact it is. It's important for me to make sure that I'm up every morning and I'm looking presentable to the world. It's important for me to have some time out meditating, once a day. It's what's important to them individually, but when you've removed the negative emotion on that triangle and you've removed the negative beliefs, you don't need to work very hard with the individual on the social side of things. It's that's the behaviour, is it almost looks after itself.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, it does make sense. What about depression and spirituality? Let's talk about this a little bit. So, how does depression affect your spirituality if you are somebody who does engage with their own relationship with their own consciousness and the connection to something greater than them?
Well, this could be a podcast in itself.
Okay. Very briefly.
You've opened up a can of worms.
Oh, shit,
I would say that I would have arguments on both ends of the scale, and what I mean by that is being in a state of depression made me as an individual dig deep. And because I had to dig deep, I would say that in a lot of ways that progressed me spiritually. But also having depression also really on some level prevents you from fully opening up and connecting to that higher level, that higher part of yourself, whatever you want to call it. If you want to call it source, if you want to call it the higher you, if you want to call it God, and what I found was when I got to a point, and it was the first time in my life that I had ever experienced this, when I didn't have any emotional baggage that I could find or connect to. So in other words, I was living a sense of ease energetically. My energy was in a place of ease. I found that not only did my energy feel larger and bigger, so it felt more expanded, so I naturally had more energy, and then of course you have more motivation, but I was much more connected to people. For example, I was able to really connect to people. I was able to feel when I was with someone and they were feeling a negative emotion because I knew it wasn't coming from me. because my energy was clear.
Ah.
Whereas in the past, when you're fighting your own negative emotions, you might not be able to identify what's yours and what's someone else's.
Yeah.
So that was kind of all part of my spiritual growth as well.
Yeah.
And being able to channel, so getting into that really, really nice, relaxed, comfortable place where you are an open vessel to open up to your own creativity, to be able to create and develop and come up with new, fresh ideas. I found that when I cleared all my negative emotion away, that became much easier for me to do as well. But I don't think I would be who I am, and I don't think that I would have developed that side of myself as much as I have done without having experienced the 20 years of depression. So it's such a difficult thing to say that one has more worth than the other.
Yeah.
I think it's all part of the spiritual journey.
Of course. Well, if you look at it from a spiritual perspective, everything's spirit, and there's a meaning that can be derived for anything that you experience on your journey. I found it really interesting that a big part of your of you overcoming your depression was that initial realization, and that you talked about just that voice, that deep inner voice, that told you that you can't do this anymore. And it's as if that was the spirit in you, like that was the deepest part of you. That's something that was something. I could see that as that was something deeper or beyond the condition. Beyond your emotions, beyond your beliefs, beyond your thoughts, beyond your body.
If I'm honest with you, when I look at my life, from the moment I was born up to this exact moment in time, I believe that everything that happened was supposed to happen exactly as it was supposed to happen. I believe that I had to suffer and I had to go through what I went through to the point where I couldn't do it anymore to overcome it, to then bring it into practice, to then be able to help other individuals overcome the negative emotion, and going even beyond that, to, it's one thing clearing out the negative emotion, but then expanding that even further and really teaching individuals how to fully 100% accept and love themselves for who they are, because that's the next stage of personal growth. And that's all part and parcel with spirituality for me as well. And you can't fully, truly love yourself in the way that you need to love yourself, right to the core of who you are, if you're carrying around any kind of negative, really serious negative emotional issues. They need to be resolved first, again, to create that space to then be able to expand and build on the work you've done. So I think there's so many levels to it. I think that, funnily enough, we were talking about this recently. I was talking about it this morning with my daughter, who's 17, and again, it's something that, even though I've known this for a long time, it's something that's really hitting home for me, is that you need to look after all aspects of yourself. You've got the physical aspects, that's the diet and the movement. It's okay to, find a nice balance. No one expects you to be some kind of saint or, only eating all healthy food and exercising, 24 hours a day. It's not about that. It's just bringing in something that's good for you. Addressing your emotional health, clearing out your depressions and your anxieties and your traumas, noticing your triggers. What and who's triggering you? Why are they triggering you? Moving on to looking at your mental body, which is, all these negative thoughts and belief systems that we hold in place, your thought patterns, and if they're not good for you, breaking them down, and then of course lastly your spiritual self. And if you can get just a nice balance within all of those aspects of yourself, you know, that's a wonderful, wonderful place to be. And it's not a race to get there either. You know, this is another mistake that a lot of us make, and I've made it, is that you think that you have to have all of your shit in every single area all under control, and if you're not, then well, that's it, you're just a failure and you're going to beat yourself up, and that you can never ever achieve that. You've got to realise that it's all a journey. It's like we're here on earth, if you want to go spiritual again, as part of a training programme. And part of that training programme is to develop all those aspects of yourself to find out on a much deeper level who you really are. And there's no rush. You don't need to rush that journey. It's not about the destination, actually. It's much more about the journey. But the journey becomes much easier when you begin to realise that they're the elements that that they're all equally as important as the other.
Totally.
You know? Because then you can go, you know, I'm great with my spirituality, for example, or, you know, I don't have many emotional problems, but actually I am neglecting myself on a physical level. And so then you can just look at tweaking that slightly.
Addressing your health in the area, and it's always going to be something that needs to be addressed, isn't it?
It's an ongoing process. It's a process of you allowing yourself to become the best version of yourself that you want to create. And that's important, that you as an individual want to create, and not in anyone else's standards, within your own. And take your time, and you can recreate yourself as many times as you want until you get the version of yourself that you feel really, really happy with. You know?
It's a bit like tending to a garden, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. Find the garden that you want, that you feel the absolute most peace within, and then maintain it.
Plant the right seeds.
Plant the right seeds, and you know, and there's no one saying that you can't plant new trees and flowers at any point in time in that garden. You know,
exactly.
There's no one saying you can't come along with a, you know, like a massive piece of machinery and just completely destroy it and start again. There's no rules apart from the ones that you create for yourself, I suppose.
I just had an insight come to me while you were talking about that, and it said that it's not about the destination so much as the participation. Engagement in physical, emotional, mental and spiritual health on an ongoing basis.
I mean, again, on an individual level, I think it's about discovering yourself. You know, so every single bit of self-development work that you do, and, you know, obviously if you're suffering from some kind of severe depression or anxiety, that you need to address those things, you know, as soon as possible. And then you can begin to move on to the lighter aspects of self-development. But yeah, it's not, we're never the finished article, are we?
Never, no. And, as soon as you build a vision and you strive towards reaching it, but then becoming too overly obsessed with the goal can be detrimental to your health, because you can cause a lot of pressure and anxiety. But I don't know if we're ever really the finished article, because as soon as we develop our vision for ourselves, of the best version of ourselves, develops with it. So there's always a new, fresher kind of place that we want to get to.
I mean, I think that the more we develop outwardly, also what's happening simultaneously is the deeper our level of understanding internally. So in other words, we might feel that we understand an aspect of ourselves, but 5 years from now we're going to understand that aspect of ourselves on an even deeper level. It continues. The learning never stops. We continue to expand outwardly, and we continue to dig deeper inwardly as well. And I think that's what, personally, you know, I can't speak for anyone else, personally that's what I think it's all about. And I think that we're at a really exciting time in history. Just the fact that for the first time in a long time, we actually have these tools now. They're available. You know, I found these tools by searching myself for them.
Yeah.
You know, by just finding, like you say, that inner voice of
Yeah.
determination. I will find a way. It's not that difficult now. Even going back 7 years ago, it was more difficult than it is today to actually get on your laptop or on even on your phone and start searching ways in which I can overcome my depression, my anxiety, my trauma. And just remembering that, you know, all of the programs that are holding these things in place are within the subconscious mind. Yeah. And so it's really good to begin to understand some more subconscious techniques to assist you and get some tools and begin that work, you know. So yeah.
Thanks, Donna. Where can people find out about your work? Give us everything.
Oh wow.
Tell us everything.
So I mean, I'm in a bit of a transitional phase myself. You know, for a number of years I've been running Newquay Therapy Centre. That's in Newquay in Cornwall, and that's where I've been seeing my one-on-one clients, and over the last few years progressed into teaching therapists these processes so that they can then become practitioners and help their own clients overcome these types of issues we've been talking about.
Yeah, brilliant.
At the moment, again, I'm looking to expand. I've started a little bit of, you called it a movement. It's very early days. It's love consciousness. And the idea with love consciousness is promoting individuals to move towards a place of self-love and compassion. And
that was a picture that just fell down of a rainbow.
But it's more of a community. It's more of a community-based thing. It's for individuals all over the world to connect.
Cool.
We will be providing, obviously, podcasts, information podcasts, meditations, therapy sessions, all of these tools to assist individuals with the types of things that we've been talking about, self-development. And then even on top of that, going a little bit further, providing personal programs. We have therapists that are offering online therapy sessions to help individuals overcome depression and anxiety if they would prefer to work with a facilitator. Yeah. So like I said, it's early days, but it's growing. It's growing all the time.
Fantastic. And what's the website and where can they find you on social media?
The website is, so you can find me under Donna Carole on Facebook or Love Consciousness or Newquay Therapy Centre. The website for Newquay Therapy Centre is www.newquaytherapycentre.co.uk and Love Consciousness is loveconsciousness.co.uk.
Okay, and on Facebook there's a group?
There's a group called Love Consciousness.
So that's just Facebook.com/Love Consciousness. Yeah. Anybody can join the group.
Anyone can
participate
join the group,
and you know, share and
it's
learn.
It's quite upbeat. It's quite a positive platform.
Yeah.
Obviously we have resources there available for individuals that are struggling.
Yeah.
But the platform on Facebook is really just to keep everyone upbeat and motivated and just it's nice to just have those gentle reminders from the community. That we're trying to move into a more positive way of living and a more positive way of being. Yeah. But we also, obviously, from the podcast that we've chatted about today, we obviously understand that there are individuals that need that extra work to get to that place of being more positive. So it's really important.
Fantastic. Thanks, Donna.
Okay.
Thanks. That was really good fun. So. We're going to wrap it up now, everybody. Just to summarise, you've got the resources for if you want to get hold of Donna and get involved with what she's doing. In terms of depression, it really is about your physical, emotional, mental and spiritual health, working with the subconscious first and foremost. And then all of the conscious elements seem to just fall into place.
They do,
Yeah. When you're working with your health, with your spiritual health, we're not promoting any particular beliefs. We're just saying that we have this element to us, whether you want to call it spirit, whether you want to call it awareness, whether you want to call it consciousness, whatever you believe about it, whether you believe it comes about as a byproduct of brain function, or if you believe that matter arises out of consciousness, whatever, it doesn't matter. We can all agree that we've got a conscious awareness. It's an element of us, and it's something that has a lot of power and a lot of benefits for our health. So sometimes maybe it's just about getting out of our own way and out of the way of the beliefs that we've got about something, and just trying out methods, because it's having experiences that really confirms to us on a personal level whether something's true or whether it isn't. So it's just about participating in our own journey, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you.